In 2007, a bride and groom vanished the night before their wedding in Savannah, Georgia. Dress pressed, tux waiting, rings on the table. No signs of struggle, no goodbye, no explanation. The case was closed in 72 hours. Cold feet, they said. Then, 1 year later, an envelope arrived at their church. Inside, a roll of film. No sender, no note, just shadows. And every year after, another. 17 years. 17 envelopes. Until the final one revealed something no one was ready to face. And a truth buried deeper than anyone dared imagine. Hit subscribe for more strange disappearances, haunted cold cases, and reality-bending investigations. Because every case starts with what's missing and ends with what was never supposed to be found. The rehearsal at Sacred Heart Chapel had gone perfectly, and Isabel Hart couldn't stop smiling as she adjusted Thomas's crooked boutonniere on the front steps. "You fixed that thing 6 times already?" Thomas Grange laughed, catching her hands. "It's fine, Izzy. Tomorrow in all our photos, you're going to look like you got dressed in the dark." Elena Vasquez, her maid of honor since art school, rolled her eyes. "You two are disgusting. Can we please go eat?" Father McKenna watched from the chapel doorway as the wedding party gathered on the steps. In 32 years of performing weddings, he'd learned to recognize real love when he saw it. The way Thomas's face lit up when Isabel laughed. How her hand instinctively found his whenever she felt nervous. "Beautiful ceremony tomorrow," he told them. "May the Lord bless your union and keep you always in his grace." But as they walked away, Father McKenna felt an unexpected chill and found himself whispering a quiet prayer for their protection. At 28, Isabel taught art therapy to children at Savannah Community Center. Thomas, 30, was a pediatric nurse who kept superhero bandages in his pocket. They'd met when he brought 7-year-old Lucy Chun to her class after leukemia treatment. "Thomas painted the ugliest flower I've ever seen," Isabel told Elena as they walked to dinner. "Completely terrible." But Lucy started giggling. And that's when I knew he understood that sometimes being willing to look foolish matters more than being good at something. At River House Tavern, Thomas surprised her with plane tickets to Florence. "You've been dreaming about the Uffizi since art school," he said, watching her face transform. "This must have cost. I've been making terrible hospital coffee instead of buying that fancy stuff, saving the difference for 6 months. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "You drank bad coffee so I could see Botticelli? Small price to watch your face when you see those paintings." Walking back to her Bull Street apartment, Thomas gave her his jacket. She breathed in his familiar scent, soap and the faint antiseptic that always clung to his scrubs. "I can't believe tomorrow's real," she said, stopping under a street lamp. "Sometimes I think I dreamed you." "You didn't dream me," Thomas said, framing her face with his hands. "Tomorrow we promise to love each other forever." They kissed soft and sweet under the amber light. A church bell chimed 10:30. "I should go," Thomas said reluctantly. "See you at the altar, future Mrs. Grange." Isabel watched him disappear around the corner, then climbed 3 flights to her apartment. Elena was already asleep on the couch with bridal magazines scattered around her. She covered Elena with a blanket, brushed her teeth, and changed into pajamas. Tomorrow she would marry the love of her life. She set her alarm for 7 a.m. and settled into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Wedding nerves, she told herself. The minutes ticked by. 11:30, midnight, 12:15. At 12:23, she heard her front door open. Isabel's eyes snapped open in the darkness. The sound was soft, careful. Someone trying not to wake anyone. "Elena?" she whispered, but she could hear her friend's steady breathing from the living room. Footsteps moved through her apartment. Not Elena's light steps. These were heavier, deliberate. Isabel's heart began to race. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. She'd left it charging in the kitchen. The footsteps stopped outside her bedroom door. She held her breath, praying she'd imagined it, praying it was Thomas playing some terrible joke. The door handle turned slowly. "Thomas?" she whispered, but she knew it wasn't him. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. The dim light from her window wasn't enough to make out features, just a tall shape that didn't belong. "Please," Isabel whispered. "Please don't." The figure stepped into her room, moving with quiet purpose. She tried to scream, tried to run, but something stung her arm, sharp, quick, like an insect bite. The room began to spin, colors bleeding together like watercolors in rain. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision blurred. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the silhouette moving toward her window, checking something outside, then turning back to lift her from the bed. When Elena woke at 9 the next morning, the apartment was silent as a tomb. "Izzy," Elena called. "Time to get married." No answer. The bedroom was empty. The bed looked slept in, but Isabel was gone. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. Her keys hung by the door. Her honeymoon suitcase waited packed and ready. At the same moment, 6 blocks away, James knocked on his brother's apartment door. "Thomas, let's go get you married." The door was unlocked. Thomas's tuxedo hung pressed and waiting. His shoes sat by the bed. But Thomas was gone. No note, no explanation, no sign of struggle. They had simply vanished 12 hours before their wedding, leaving behind only silence and the lingering scent of something wrong. October 15th, 2007. The last day anyone would see Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange as free people. What had happened to them in those dark hours before dawn? No one would know for 17 years. 17 years later, Father Miguel Santos found the envelope on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other. He'd been at Sacred Heart Chapel for 6 months now, long enough to settle into the rhythm of parish life, but not long enough to stop missing his previous calling as a police chaplain. At 45, Miguel had traded crisis calls and hospital vigils for wedding preparations and Sunday sermons, seeking something closer to peace. Opening the chapel mailbox had become part of his morning routine: bills, donation requests, the occasional wedding inquiry. But today, beneath the usual correspondence, his fingers found something different. A padded manila envelope with no return address, containing something that rattled softly when shaken. Inside was a roll of 35mm film and a small piece of paper with 4 words in careful block letters: Year 17 still waiting. Miguel stood in the morning light filtering through ancient oak trees, turning the film canister over in his hands. Something about those words, the careful lettering, the patient counting of years, made his chest tighten. "Father Santos?" Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont's voice carried across the courtyard. The church secretary had been Sacred Heart's backbone for 20 years. "Everything all right?" "Strange delivery," Miguel said, holding up the envelope. Film roll with a note about 17 years of waiting. Mrs. Beaumont's face changed, a flicker of recognition followed by what looked like relief. "Oh, honey," she said, walking closer. "Those have been coming every year since I started here. Same time every year. October 15th. Miguel blinked. "Every year. Regular as clockwork. Father McKenna always told us to store them with the other church mysteries. Said some things weren't ours to solve, just ours to pray over." Her voice carried the weight of a secret kept too long. But it troubled him something fierce, especially toward the end. 20 minutes later, Miguel stood in the storage closet behind the sacristy, staring at a cardboard box labeled McKenna, Personal. Inside were 16 manila envelopes, identical to the one he'd found that morning, each marked with careful block letters: Year 1, Year 2, all the way through Year 16, all unopened. "He never looked?" Miguel asked. Mrs. Beaumont shook her head. Said whoever was sending them would reveal their purpose when the time was right. "But Father, those last few years, sometimes I'd find him just standing here, staring at that box like it was calling to him." Miguel lifted one of the earlier envelopes, Year 3, and felt its weight. 17 years of someone's story, waiting in the dark. His police chaplain instincts were screaming that this wasn't just mysterious. It was wrong. "Mrs. Beaumont, what did Father McKenna think they were?" "Lost souls," he said. "People who couldn't find their way home." She paused, wrapping her cardigan tighter. But I always thought he was afraid they were something more earthly than spiritual. Miguel made his decision. I'm developing these photos. All of them. An hour later, at Coastal Camera on Bull Street, Miguel watched Jerry Morrison examine the film canisters with professional curiosity. Well preserved, Jerry said, turning one toward the light. Should develop fine. Give me 2 hours for the recent batch. Those 2 hours felt like the longest of Miguel's life. When Jerry called, Miguel's hands were shaking as he drove back to the shop. Father, Jerry said quietly, sliding an envelope across the counter. I have to warn you, these aren't normal photos. The first image Miguel pulled out made his breath catch. It was dark, blurry, taken in poor lighting. 2 figures stood against what might have been a wall, but their faces were obscured by shadow and motion blur. One appeared to be wearing light-colored clothing, the other darker clothes. Whether they were young or old, willing participants or captives, was impossible to tell. The second photo was equally unclear. The same 2 figures, but the image was overexposed, washing out most details. Miguel could make out what might have been an indoor setting, maybe concrete walls, but everything was indistinct, uncertain. My God! Miguel whispered, studying the blurry images. Jerry, can you tell anything about these people? Are they in distress? Jerry shook his head. Hard to say. The lighting's terrible, cameras moving, subjects aren't still. Could be a basement, could be a garage. Could be people posing, could be people who don't want to be photographed. These look like someone was taking pictures in a hurry, or trying to hide what they were doing. Miguel spread the unclear photos across Jerry's counter, his heart pounding. Someone had been sending these shadowy, indistinct images to Sacred Heart Chapel for 17 years. But who were the people in them? Were they even alive? Were they the same people in each photo, or different victims over time? Jerry, I need you to develop all of them. Every single role. Maybe the earlier ones are clearer. Back at Sacred Heart, Miguel spread the ambiguous photographs across his desk. They told no clear story, just shadows and blur, figures that could be anyone, images that raised more questions than answers. Were these people being held against their will? Were they even still alive? Was someone documenting crimes? Or were these just badly taken pictures of something innocent? Miguel opened his laptop but realized he had no idea what to search for. Without clear faces or identifiable details, these photos could be connected to any missing persons case from the past 17 years, or none at all. He reached for his phone. Father McKenna might have chosen prayer over action, but Miguel had spent too many years with police to ignore what might be evidence of ongoing suffering. The problem was, he didn't even know what crime he might be reporting. All he had were 17 years of shadows, waiting in the dark for someone to finally see them clearly. But somewhere, someone had been sending these images for a reason. And after 17 years of silence, Miguel wasn't going to let them wait any longer, even if he didn't yet understand what they were trying to tell him. The next morning, Detective Laura Murphy sat across from Father Miguel in Sacred Heart's parish office, staring at 17 years of unclear photographs spread between them like pieces of a puzzle with too many missing parts. She'd been with Savannah PD for 12 years, long enough to know that blurry evidence usually meant someone was trying to hide something. These are almost useless, she said bluntly, examining the shadowy images with a magnifying glass. Poor lighting, motion blur, subjects not clearly visible. But that might be intentional. Someone's documenting something they don't want clearly documented. Miguel nodded grimly. The question is what? And whether these people, whoever they are still alive. Detective Murphy made notes in her pad. Before we start speculating about these photos, I need to ask, why would someone send them to this specific church? What makes Sacred Heart significant? That's what I've been wondering. Father McKenna never mentioned any connection to missing persons cases. Miguel paused, struck by a thought. Mrs. Beaumont would know. She's been here 20 years. The office door opened as if summoned, and Mrs. Beaumont appeared with a tea service, her face pale but determined. Father, I've been thinking about those photos all night. There's something I should have mentioned yesterday. Miguel looked up. What do you mean? Father McKenna didn't just store those envelopes. The last few years, he started acting strange around October 15th. He'd spend hours in his office, looking through old church records. Wedding records, specifically. She set down the tea with shaking hands. He was searching for something, but he never told me what. Detective Murphy leaned forward. Church wedding records from what time period? Around 2007, mostly. He kept pulling the same file over and over. Mrs. Beaumont disappeared and returned with a manila folder. I kept his desk organized after he passed. This was the one he looked at most. Murphy opened the folder and found a single church record. Hart Grange wedding October 15th, 2007. Cancelled. Family emergency. A cancelled wedding, Miguel said, studying the record. Scheduled for October 15th. The same date these photos arrive every year. Father McKenna knew this couple? Murphy asked. Mrs. Beaumont nodded slowly. He'd performed their rehearsal the night before. They were supposed to marry here the next day, but they never showed up. Father McKenna said it was the strangest thing. Everything was ready, families were gathering, but the bride and groom had simply vanished. Miguel felt a chill. Mrs. Beaumont, do you remember their names? Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange. Such a lovely couple. I helped coordinate their flowers, their music. Father McKenna was so fond of them. Her voice grew sad. He felt terrible when they disappeared. Wondered if he could have done something to prevent it. Detective Murphy was taking rapid notes. What do you remember about when they disappeared? October 15th, 2007. The morning of their wedding, the families called frantically. No one could find them. They just vanished from their apartments the night before. Police came, asked some questions, but she trailed off. But what? Miguel pressed. The investigation ended very quickly. Detectives said they'd probably gotten cold feet and run away together. Case was closed within days. Father McKenna never believed it. Murphy looked up sharply. Which detective handled the case? William Crawford. He seemed very eager to close it fast. Said young couples do this all the time. Miguel stared at the church record, then at the blurry photographs. Mrs. Beaumont, do you think Father McKenna suspected these photos might be of Isabel and Thomas? He wondered, but the pictures are so unclear he could never be sure. Could be them, could be any young couple. That's what tormented him. Not knowing if he was looking at evidence that they were still alive, or just shadows of strangers. Murphy gathered the church records. I need to pull the original case file on Hart and Grange. This Detective Crawford. Is he still active? Retired in 2008, moved to Florida. Died in 2019, Mrs. Beaumont said quietly. Miguel looked again at the unclear photographs, then at the wedding record. Detective Murphy, what are the chances that after 17 years, if these photos are of Isabel and Thomas, they're still alive? Murphy didn't answer immediately. She studied the blurry images, the progression from year 1 to year 17. Father, someone's been sending these photos annually for 17 years. That suggests ongoing documentation of something. But whether we're looking at evidence of survival or something else entirely, she paused. We need to find out what really happened to Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange. Miguel felt the weight of 17 years of mystery pressing down on him. Two people who should have been married in this very chapel had vanished instead. Someone had been sending shadowy reminders of that loss every year since. Where do we start? He asked. With the one thing we know for certain, Murphy said, pointing to the wedding record. Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange were real people who vanished from this city on what should have been the happiest day of their lives. Whether they're in these photos or not, their case was never properly investigated. She stood up, gathering her materials. It's time to find out what Detective Crawford was really hiding, and why someone wants Sacred Heart Chapel to remember this canceled wedding badly enough to keep sending reminders year after year. Miguel stared at the church record, a wedding that never happened, two people who never came home. After 17 years, someone was still waiting for them to be found. The question was, were they waiting as victims or as survivors? Detective Murphy spread the Hart Grange case file across her desk the next morning, and what she found made her stomach turn. The original investigation had been a sham. 3 interviews, no follow-up, and a conclusion reached before the evidence had even been processed. "Father Santos, look at this," she said when Miguel arrived at the station. Detective Crawford's report from October 2007. He interviewed exactly 3 people: Isabel's mother, Thomas's brother, and their maid of honor Elena Vasquez. That's it. Miguel studied the thin file. What about friends, co-workers, neighbors? Nothing. No canvas of their apartments, no check of their financial records, no interviews with wedding vendors. Murphy flipped through the sparse pages. Crawford ruled it a voluntary disappearance after 72 hours. Said the couple got cold feet and ran away together. But their families disagreed? Vehemently. Look at this. Murphy pointed to a handwritten note in the margin. Thomas's brother James insisted Thomas would never have left without calling. Said Thomas was excited about the wedding, had been planning it for months. Miguel read the note, then looked up. Dr. James Grange, he's still in Savannah. Works at Memorial Hospital. Maybe he'd talk to us. An hour later, they sat across from Dr. James Grange in a small conference room at Memorial Hospital. At 43, he carried himself with the careful control of someone who'd learned to function despite carrying a deep wound. "Detective Murphy, Father Santos," he said, shaking their hands. "Your call yesterday brought back a lot of memories I've tried to forget." Miguel watched James's face as Detective Murphy explained about the annual photographs. The careful medical composure cracked slightly, revealing 17 years of suppressed grief. "Someone's been sending photos to the church?" James asked quietly. "Photos that might be of Thomas and Isabel?" "We can't be certain," Murphy said carefully. "The images are unclear, but the timing, October 15th every year, suggests a connection to their disappearance." James was quiet for a long moment. "Detective Crawford told our families they'd probably gotten scared and run away. But I knew my brother. Thomas was the most responsible person I'd ever met. He wouldn't have left without telling someone." "Dr. Grange, what do you remember about the days before their disappearance?" Miguel asked. "Thomas was excited but nervous. Normal wedding jitters, I thought. But looking back," James paused, concentrating. "He mentioned something about feeling watched. Said he'd noticed someone following them, but he couldn't be sure." Detective Murphy leaned forward. "Following them how?" "Different places over several days. A man with a camera, professional equipment. Thomas thought it might be wedding-related at first, but something about the guy made him uncomfortable." "Did he describe this person?" "Tall, thin, expensive camera gear. Thomas said he seemed to know where they'd be, like he was studying their routines." James's voice grew tighter. "The last time I talked to Thomas, the night before the wedding, he said he was going to mention it to their photographer the next morning." Miguel felt a chill. "Dr. Grange, do you remember who their wedding photographer was?" "Some local guy Isabel found. I never met him, but she was excited about hiring him. Said he specialized in intimate weddings, really understood love stories." James frowned. "I can't remember his name, but Isabel's friend Elena would know. She helped coordinate all the vendors." After leaving the hospital, Murphy and Miguel drove to the Savannah Community Center, where Elena Vasquez now ran the art therapy program that Isabel had started. At 38, Elena had the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much loss but kept fighting anyway. "Elena, we need to ask you about Isabel and Thomas's wedding preparations," Murphy said gently. "Specifically, their photographer." Elena's expression grew guarded. "Why? Has something happened?" Miguel explained about the annual photographs, watching Elena's face grow pale. "Someone's been sending pictures to Sacred Heart? For 17 years. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Do you think they might still be alive?" "We're trying to determine that," Murphy said. "But first, we need to know about their photographer." Elena wiped her eyes. "Marcus Beaumont. He had a studio on Bull Street. Izzy was so excited when she found him. Said he really understood what she wanted. Not just posed pictures, but real moments. candid shots that captured genuine emotion. What do you remember about him personally? He was intense, very focused on Isabel during the planning meetings. Asked a lot of questions about her background, her dreams, her relationship with Thomas. Elena paused. Looking back, it felt like he was studying her rather than just planning photos. Murphy made notes. Did anything about him seem unusual? He kept talking about preserving their love story. Said most couples didn't understand the importance of documenting every moment, every emotion. He wanted to do engagement photos, rehearsal photos, preparation photos, way more than we budgeted for. Did they do additional photo sessions with him? A few. Engagement photos at Forsyth Park, some candid shots around the city. But Marcus kept pushing for more. Said he wanted to capture their love in all its different moods and settings. Elena's voice grew uncomfortable. Izzy started feeling like he was always around, always watching. Miguel exchanged glances with Murphy. Elena, is Marcus Beaumont still operating his studio? As far as I know. I drive past it sometimes. Still has the same sign, same wedding photos in the window. Elena looked between them. You think he's connected to their disappearance? We don't know yet, Murphy said. But we need to talk to him. An hour later, Miguel found himself standing outside Beaumont Photography Studio on Bull Street, studying the elegant storefront. Through the large windows, he could see walls lined with wedding photographs. Dozens of couples captured in their perfect moments. Remember, Murphy said through his earpiece, you're just a priest looking for a photographer. Don't mention the photos or the missing couple. We need to see how he reacts to normal questions first. Miguel took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The bell chimed softly as he entered, and classical music played from hidden speakers. The studio smelled of developer chemicals and fresh flowers. Can I help you? A tall, thin man emerged from the back office, extending his hand with a practiced smile. I'm Marcus Beaumont. Miguel shook the offered hand, studying the man's face. Mid-50s, graying hair, pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Father Santos from Sacred Heart Chapel. I have a young couple getting married next month, and they're looking for a photographer. Of course, Father. Please, sit down. Marcus gestured to a leather chair beside his desk. Tell me about this couple. What's their love story? As Marcus spoke, Miguel found himself studying the photographs on the walls. Every bride had dark hair and luminous eyes. Every groom looked protective and gentle. The variation was subtle, but the pattern was unmistakable. They're very much in love, Miguel said carefully. The bride teaches art, works with children. The groom is a caregiver by nature. Marcus's smile flickered, just for a moment. An art teacher? How wonderful. And where does she work? The community center. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. A tightening around the eyes, a subtle change in posture. Art therapy with children. That's quite specialized work. Miguel kept his voice casual. Tell me, Mr. Beaumont, what makes your photography special? I believe in capturing love as it truly is, Father. Not just the surface beauty, but the deep, eternal connection between two souls. Marcus moved to the wall of photographs, his fingers trailing along the frames. Most photographers just take pictures. I document love stories. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke about love, something possessive that made Miguel's skin crawl. Do you stay in touch with couples after their weddings? Oh yes, love doesn't end at the altar, Father. It deepens, it matures. I like to document that journey. Marcus's eyes grew distant. Some couples become very dear to me. Their love stories become part of my own story. Miguel felt his pulse quicken. That sounds like a very personal approach to photography. The best art is always personal, Father. When you truly understand your subjects, when you know their hopes and fears and dreams, you can capture their essence forever. The way he said forever made Miguel think of 17 years of photographs, 17 years of someone documenting something in shadows and blur. I should probably get back to the church, Miguel said, standing slowly. Could I get some information to show the couple? Marcus handed him an elegant folder. "Father, I hope you'll bring them by soon. I'd very much like to meet them, especially the art teacher." As Miguel walked back towards Sacred Heart, the folder felt heavy in his hands. He pulled out his phone and called Detective Murphy. "Laura, I just met Marcus Beaumont. There's something wrong with him. The way he talks about his subjects, about love, about documenting relationships." Miguel's voice was tight. "I think we need to move carefully, but we need to move fast." "What did you find out?" "He's obsessed with couples in love, particularly couples where the woman is an art teacher." "And Laura?" "He's still operating that studio, still taking pictures, still talking about preserving love stories forever." Through his earpiece, Miguel heard Murphy's sharp intake of breath. "Father, get back here immediately. We need to start building a case, because if Marcus Beaumont has been sending those photos for 17 years, then somewhere in this city, he might still be taking pictures of Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange." Detective Murphy stared at the property records spread across her desk at Savannah PD, tracing ownership lines that painted a disturbing picture. Marcus Beaumont didn't just own the photography studio on Bull Street. His family's name appeared on deeds throughout the county, inherited properties that had been in the Beaumont family for generations. "Father Santos, look at this," she said, pointing to a highlighted entry. "The Beaumont family estate, 15 miles outside the city. 200 acres. Main house built in 1857. And here's the interesting part. It's been listed as vacant since 1995. Miguel leaned over her shoulder, studying the documents. "But someone's been paying the utilities." "Exactly. Water, electricity, even internet service. All paid by automatic bank transfer from Marcus Beaumont's business account." Murphy pulled up satellite images on her computer. "The property is isolated, surrounded by dense forest, single-access road. If you wanted to hide something, this would be the place." She clicked through the aerial photos, zooming in on various structures. The main house was a sprawling antebellum mansion, clearly abandoned, but behind it were several outbuildings that looked better maintained. A barn, what appeared to be servants' quarters, and something that might have been a workshop. "We need to get out there," Miguel said. "If there's any chance Isabel and Thomas are being held somewhere, we will, but we need to be smart about this." Murphy closed the laptop. "If Beaumont has been involved in their disappearance, he's had 17 years to perfect whatever he's doing. One wrong move and we could destroy any evidence that's left." Miguel's phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. He opened it and felt his blood turn cold. "Father, I believe you visited my studio today. I hope you found our conversation illuminating. Perhaps you'd like to see some of my private work? The kind I don't display for casual visitors. Tomorrow is October 16th, a very special anniversary for some of my favorite subjects. Join me at the family estate if you'd like to witness true artistic dedication. Come alone, of course. Bring anyone else and my current project will end very abruptly. MB." Murphy read the message over his shoulder and immediately grabbed her radio. "This is Detective Murphy. I need tactical units and a helicopter standing by. We have a credible threat and a potential hostage situation." "Wait," Miguel said, putting his hand on her arm. "If we go in with tactical units and there's anyone still alive, he might." "Father, you cannot be considering going out there alone." "Not alone. With backup, but backup he can't see." Miguel's police chaplain experience was kicking in. "You position your people around the perimeter, but let me go in first. After 17 years, if there's anyone left to find, they need to see someone they can trust." Murphy stared at him. "Miguel, we don't even know what we're walking into. Those photos could be years old. This could be a trap. Laura, think about this. He's invited me there for a reason. October 16th, the day after their anniversary. He's been building to something for 17 years, and now he wants an audience." Miguel stood up, pacing. Maybe he wants to confess. Maybe he wants to show off his work. Maybe he's ready to end whatever he's been doing. Murphy was quiet for a long moment, then picked up her phone. "I'm calling the state police. We're going to need their tactical team, and we're going to need them tonight." 3 hours later, Miguel found himself in the back of an unmarked surveillance van, watching the sun set over the Beaumont family estate through high-powered binoculars. The property was even more isolated than the aerial photos had suggested. The access road wound through dense pine forest for 2 miles before reaching the main house. "Movement detected in the barn area," whispered Officer Davis, the tactical team's surveillance specialist. "Can't make out what it is from this distance. Could be equipment, could be someone moving around." Miguel adjusted his binoculars, focusing on the barn windows. There were lights on inside, shadows moving behind curtained windows, but nothing clear enough to identify what was happening. "Hard to tell what's going on in there," he said quietly, "but something's definitely happening." Murphy's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Father, we've got the perimeter secured. Snipers in position, tactical team ready to move. But remember, you get in trouble, you call for help immediately. Don't try to be a hero." Miguel checked his phone. 5:30 p.m. The message had said to come at sunset. "One more thing," he said into his radio. "Whatever we find in there, whether it's evidence, whether it's remains, whether it's something else entirely, we need to be prepared for anything. If Isabel and Thomas are still alive after 17 years, they're going to need serious help. Understood. Medical team and forensics are both standing by." Miguel climbed out of the van and walked toward the estate, his heart pounding. The evening air was cool, and the only sounds were his footsteps on gravel and the distant hum of cicadas. Somewhere ahead, in that barn or in the main house, lay the answers to what had happened to Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange. As he approached the front gate, his phone buzzed again. "Welcome, Father. Walk straight to the barn. Don't disappoint me by bringing friends. I'll know if you do, and my art project will end very suddenly. Time to see what 17 years of perfect love looks like." Miguel took a deep breath and walked through the gate, knowing that behind him, hidden in the forest, a dozen officers were watching his every move, but knowing also that if he made one wrong decision, any chance of finding answers or survivors could disappear forever. The barn door stood open, light spilling out into the gathering darkness. As Miguel got closer, he could smell something chemical like photography developer. The sound of classical music drifted from inside, soft and eerie in the stillness. He paused at the threshold, steeling himself for whatever he might find. 17 years of mystery were about to be resolved, one way or another. "Mr. Beaumont?" Miguel called softly. "It's Father Santos. You invited me here." A voice answered from inside, cultured and calm. "Please come in, Father. You're just in time for the evening session." Miguel stepped into the barn, his eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lighting. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all carefully mounted and displayed like a gallery exhibition. But these weren't the wedding photos from the studio. These were something else entirely, something that made Miguel's skin crawl with recognition and dread. "Welcome to my real work, Father," Marcus Beaumont said, stepping out from behind a partition. "I hope you're prepared to witness what true dedication to love looks like." Miguel forced himself to remain calm as he scanned the photographs, searching for any sign of the two people whose disappearance had haunted Sacred Heart Chapel for 17 years. After 17 years of waiting, he was finally going to learn the truth. The barn smelled of old hay and something else, chemicals like a photography darkroom. Miguel stepped through the open doorway, his eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lighting that illuminated what had once been a simple farm building, but was now something far more sinister. The walls were lined with photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all carefully mounted and displayed like a gallery exhibition. But as Miguel's eyes adjusted, he realized these weren't the romantic wedding photos from Marcus's studio. These were documentation of something terrible. Shadowy images, unclear faces, people who looked tired, defeated, broken. "Welcome, Father Santos." Marcus Beaumont stepped out from behind a partition, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, as if he were hosting an art opening instead of whatever this was. "I'm so glad you accepted my invitation. Not many people get to see my life's work." Miguel forced himself to remain calm, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Mr. Beaumont, what is this place? This is my studio, my sanctuary, the place where I've been perfecting the art of preserving love. Marcus gestured toward the photographs with obvious pride. Do you know how rare it is, Father, to find subjects willing to commit completely to their art? Miguel's eyes scanned the photos as Marcus spoke. They were all unclear, taken in poor lighting, but there was something consistent about them. Two figures, always two figures, in what appeared to be the same space over many years. These photos, they're the ones you've been sending to Sacred Heart, Miguel said, his voice steady despite the horror building in his chest. A small sampling, yes. I wanted the church to understand what real commitment looks like. What love looks like when it's tested, refined, purified through dedication. Marcus moved closer to the wall of photographs. Look at the progression, Father. See how they've learned to embrace their true purpose. Miguel noticed something that made his stomach turn. The photos were dated year by year, showing the same two shadowy figures aging, changing, their postures growing more compliant over time. Where are they now? Miguel asked, his throat dry. Marcus smiled, the expression chilling in its genuine warmth. They're preparing for tonight's session. October 16th has always been special for us. It's the day after their original wedding date, the day they learned what real commitment looks like. He led Miguel toward a doorway at the back of the barn that had been concealed behind a curtain. But first, I want to show you the heart of my work, the space where true art happens. The doorway opened onto stairs leading down into a basement that had been excavated beneath the barn. The air grew colder as they descended, heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else Miguel couldn't identify. The basement was divided into several rooms, each serving a different purpose. There was a dark room with enlargers and chemical baths, a storage area filled with camera equipment, and at the far end, a living space that made Miguel's skin crawl. It was decorated like a mockery of a home. Mismatched furniture, amateur paintings on the walls, and everything sized just slightly wrong, as if designed to remind the occupants that nothing here was real. They've learned to be quite comfortable here, Marcus said, noting Miguel's expression. It took some time, of course. The first few years were challenging. But people can adapt to anything if you're patient enough. Miguel heard movement from behind a closed door, footsteps, the soft murmur of voices. His heart began to race. After 17 years, could someone actually still be alive down here? They're excited about tonight's session, Marcus continued. We've been planning something very special, a recreation of their original wedding day, but perfected. No interruptions, no outside interference, just pure artistic expression. Miguel reached slowly for the emergency button hidden in his jacket pocket. The tactical team was 10 minutes away, but he needed to keep Marcus talking, needed to confirm what he was seeing. Marcus, he said carefully, who exactly are you keeping down here? The door opened before Marcus could answer, and Miguel's breath caught in his throat. Two figures emerged from the room, moving with the careful deliberation of people who had learned that any wrong move brought consequences. They were older, thinner, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow. But despite the years, despite the changes, Miguel recognized them from the faded newspaper photo he'd seen days earlier. Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange. Alive, but barely recognizable as the vibrant young couple who had disappeared 17 years ago. They wore clothes that might once have been wedding attire. A white dress that had been altered and patched over the years. A dark suit that hung loose on Thomas's diminished frame. They moved like actors who had performed the same scene countless times. Their expressions blank, resigned. "Hello, Father," Isabel said, her voice soft and distant. "Marcus told us you might be joining us for the ceremony tonight." Miguel stared at her, searching for any sign of the vibrant young woman from the church records. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, her face lined with years of something that went beyond normal aging. But her eyes still held a flicker of the person she had been. "Isabel," Miguel said gently, "my name is Father Miguel Santos. I'm from Sacred Heart Chapel." Something flickered in her eyes at the mention of the church. "Sacred Heart?" she repeated slowly, as if trying to remember a language she'd once spoken. The place where you were supposed to be married, Miguel continued. Your families have been looking for you. They never stopped hoping. Marcus stepped forward, his expression darkening. Father, I think you misunderstand the situation here. Isabel and Thomas have found their true calling. They've dedicated their lives to creating something beautiful, something eternal. We're artists now, Thomas said, speaking for the first time. His voice was hollow, rehearsed, but Miguel caught something underneath. A tremor of the man he had once been. We help Marcus document love in its purest form. Miguel felt sick. These weren't just captives. They were people who had been so thoroughly broken that they had learned to participate in their own imprisonment. The session tonight will be our masterpiece, Marcus said, moving to a wall covered with elaborate plans and sketches. 17 years of preparation, leading to this moment. The perfect wedding, captured forever. Miguel looked at the plans and felt ice in his veins. They weren't just artistic sketches. They were detailed diagrams for what looked like a final photograph. Something that would end with Isabel and Thomas never needing another photo session. Marcus, he said carefully, what exactly are you planning for tonight? Marcus smiled, and Miguel realized that whatever had been keeping Isabel and Thomas alive for 17 years was about to end. Tonight, Father, we create the ultimate expression of eternal love, a wedding that will never end, because it will capture them at the perfect moment forever. Behind him, Isabel and Thomas stood in their makeshift wedding clothes, waiting for whatever Marcus had planned. Their spirits so broken that they no longer seemed to understand the difference between love and captivity. Miguel pressed the emergency button and began to pray that the tactical team would arrive before Marcus's final session began. Miguel's finger pressed the emergency button hidden in his jacket as Marcus turned away to adjust his camera equipment. The silent alarm would bring Detective Murphy and the tactical team, but they were still 10 minutes away. 10 minutes to keep Isabel and Thomas alive while their captor prepared what he clearly intended to be their final photo session. This is beautiful work, Miguel said, moving closer to Marcus's setup while scanning the basement for anything he could use as a weapon or distraction. You've obviously put years of thought into tonight. 17 years, Marcus confirmed, his voice filled with pride as he positioned a professional lighting rig. Every anniversary we've practiced. Every photo session has been preparation for this moment. Tonight, Isabel and Thomas will become eternal, captured forever at the peak of their beauty, their love preserved for all time. Miguel noticed the carefully arranged props. A small table set for two, champagne glasses filled with what looked like wine but probably wasn't, white roses that would photograph beautifully against the dark backdrop Marcus had constructed. It was a death scene designed to look like a romantic culmination. Father Miguel, Isabel said softly, approaching him with the hesitant steps of someone who had learned caution through years of pain. Are you really from Sacred Heart? I am, Miguel said, turning to face her fully. I've seen your church records, Isabel. I know you were supposed to marry Thomas there on October 15th, 2007. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, memory, maybe even hope. But then Marcus called her name sharply, and the light died. Isabel, we need to begin. The lighting is perfect. Marcus gestured toward the arranged scene. Thomas, take your position by the table. Tonight we capture love as it was meant to be, eternal, unchanging, perfect. Thomas moved obediently toward his mark, but Miguel noticed something the others missed. Thomas's hand brushed against a palette knife from Marcus's art supplies, and the blade disappeared into his sleeve. After 17 years, some part of him was still fighting. Marcus, Miguel said, buying time. Before you begin, I have to ask, why the church? Why send the photos to Sacred Heart all these years? Marcus paused in his setup, genuine emotion crossing his face. Because that's where their story was supposed to end. In mediocrity, in ordinary life, in the kind of love that fades with time. I saved them from that, Father. I gave them something greater. By holding them prisoner? By giving them purpose. Marcus's voice rose, passionate now. Do you know how many couples promise to love each other forever and break that promise within 5 years? Isabel and Thomas have lived their vows truly. They've committed completely to their love, to their art. Miguel watched Isabel's face as Marcus spoke. She was listening, but there was something behind her eyes now. Anger, maybe, or recognition of the lies she'd been forced to live with. Isabel, Miguel said directly to her, ignoring Marcus's protests. Your mother Rosa moved to Atlanta after you disappeared, but she never stopped hoping. Your friend Elena still runs art therapy programs in your honor. Thomas, your brother James became a doctor, but he's never stopped looking for you. Stop, Marcus snapped, moving toward Miguel. They don't need to hear about the past. Their life is here. Their purpose is here. But Miguel kept talking, his voice growing stronger. They had jobs they loved, friends who cared about them, families who have been mourning them for 17 years. They had a life, Marcus. You didn't save them from anything. You stole their chance to live. Father Miguel, Thomas said suddenly, his voice clearer than it had been all evening. Is Elena really still teaching art? She is. She runs programs for children with cancer, just like you used to help with at the hospital, Thomas. Miguel saw Marcus reaching for something behind his camera setup. A syringe, probably the same kind he'd used to take them 17 years ago. Marcus, Miguel said, stepping between him and the couple. It's over. The police are already surrounding this property. Let them go, and maybe we can. Marcus lunged forward with the syringe, but Thomas was faster. The palette knife appeared in his hand, and 17 years of suppressed rage and survival instinct drove it deep into Marcus's shoulder. Marcus screamed, stumbling backward, blood streaming down his arm. You ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done to us, Thomas said, his voice stronger now, more like the man he'd once been. Miguel heard the sound he'd been praying for. Boots on the stairs, shouts of police. Everyone down. They're here, Miguel yelled. Basement. 3 civilians. 1 wounded suspect. The tactical team poured into the basement like a flood of salvation. Marcus, wounded and confused, raised his hands as officers surrounded him. Miguel grabbed Isabel and Thomas, pulling them away from the chaos. It's over, he told them, his voice shaking with relief and adrenaline. It's finally over. Isabel collapsed against Thomas, both of them trembling as 17 years of carefully maintained control finally cracked. They held each other as they hadn't been allowed to hold each other in years. Not for a photograph, not for Marcus's twisted vision of love, but simply because they needed each other. Is it real? Isabel whispered, looking up at Miguel with eyes that were slowly coming back to life. Are we really free? You're free, Miguel said, tears streaming down his face. You're going home. Detective Murphy appeared at Miguel's side as paramedics began treating Marcus's wound and checking Isabel and Thomas for injuries. Father, are you hurt? No, but they need medical attention. And Laura? Miguel looked at the walls covered with 17 years of documented torture. They're going to need a lot more than medical attention. They're going to need time to remember who they were before this happened. As the paramedics led Isabel and Thomas toward the stairs, Miguel heard Isabel speak to one of the EMTs. Is it really October? She asked. 2024? Yes, ma'am. We've been here so long, she whispered. I thought maybe the world had ended. Miguel followed them up the stairs, out of the basement that had been their prison for 17 years. Behind them, Marcus Beaumont sat handcuffed and bleeding, his twisted gallery of horrors finally exposed to the light. As they emerged into the cool night air, Isabel looked up at the stars. The same stars that had been shining the night before her wedding 17 years ago. Thomas, she said softly, do you think we can still get married? Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile Miguel had seen from him. I've been waiting 17 years to marry you, Izzy. I think I can wait a little longer for you to heal. Miguel watched them walk toward the waiting ambulances, knowing that the hardest part wasn't over. It was just beginning. After 17 years of captivity, Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange would have to learn how to live as free people again. But tonight, for the first time in 17 years, they would sleep without being watched, without being photographed, without being forced to perform their love for someone else's twisted vision. Tonight, they were finally free. 6 months later, Father Miguel stood at the altar of Sacred Heart Chapel, watching Isabel Hart walk slowly down the aisle in a simple white dress. She moved carefully, deliberately, her hand resting on her brother-in-law James's arm as he walked her toward the man who had waited 17 years to marry her. Thomas stood at the altar in a navy suit, his hair gray now, his face lined with years that had aged him beyond his 47 years. But when he saw Isabel approaching, his smile was the same one Miguel had seen in those old church records from 2007, pure, unguarded love. The chapel was small, intimate. Elena Vasquez sat in the front pew, tears streaming down her face as she watched her best friend reclaim the moment that had been stolen from her. Rosa Hart had flown in from Atlanta, unable to believe her daughter was truly alive until she held her in her arms 3 days ago. The congregation was small but fierce in their support. Nurses from Memorial Hospital, where Thomas was slowly returning to work. Art teachers from the community center where Isabel hoped to teach again someday. Detective Murphy sat near the back, still amazed that after 17 years, this story had ended with healing instead of heartbreak. "Dearly beloved," Miguel began, his voice carrying the weight of everything these two people had survived. "We are gathered here today to witness what should have happened 17 years ago, and what has always been true despite everything that tried to destroy it. The marriage of Isabel and Thomas." Miguel had spent hours with them over the past months, not as their therapist, they had excellent professional help for that, but as their priest, helping them understand that their love had survived something that should have destroyed it completely. "Isabel and Thomas," he continued, "you have already proven your commitment to each other in ways that most couples never could. You protected each other in darkness. You held on to love when everything around you was designed to crush it. Today, we simply speak aloud what has always been true." Isabel's voice was steady as she spoke her vows. Words she had written 17 years ago and carried in her heart through everything Marcus had done to them. "Thomas, you saved me every day by reminding me who I was when someone was trying to make me forget. You are my home, my safety, my future. I choose you today just like I chose you every day we were apart from the world." Thomas's vows were simpler, his voice rougher with emotion. "Isabel, you kept my heart alive when I thought I had forgotten how to feel. You are my courage, my hope, my reason to believe in tomorrow. I marry you today not just as the woman I fell in love with, but as the woman who fought beside me to keep that love alive." Miguel had officiated hundreds of weddings, but none where the exchange of rings carried such weight. These weren't just symbols of commitment, they were declarations of victory over someone who had tried to pervert their love into something ugly. "By the power vested in me, and in the sight of God and this community that loves you, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Miguel smiled, his own eyes wet with tears. "Thomas, you may kiss your bride." Their kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deeper as they remembered what it felt like to touch each other by choice, not command. The chapel erupted in applause and tears. 17 years of grief and fear finally transformed into joy. At the reception in the church hall, Elena gave a toast that left not a dry eye in the room. "I've known Isabel since we were 18 and thought we knew everything about love, but she and Thomas taught us all what love really means. Not just the easy part, the flowers and poetry part, but the part where you hold on to each other when hell itself tries to tear you apart." James spoke next, his voice breaking as he raised his glass. "My brother has always been the strongest person I know. But Isabel, you're the one who kept him strong when I couldn't. You're the reason he's still here, still fighting, still believing in tomorrow." Rosa Hart, Isabel's mother, stood last. Her words were simple but carried the weight of 17 years of prayer. "I never stopped lighting candles for you too. Every Sunday, every holiday, every birthday you missed. Today, I finally get to blow them out because my prayers have been answered." Later, as the reception wound down, Miguel found Isabel and Thomas standing together in the chapel, looking up at the stained glass windows that caught the late afternoon light. "Thank you," Isabel said simply, "for not letting us stay lost." "You were never lost," Miguel replied. You were just waiting for someone to help you come home. Thomas nodded toward the altar where they had just been married. Father McKenna would have liked this, I think. He always said this chapel was meant for love that endures. He would have, Miguel agreed. And he would have been proud that Sacred Heart finally got to host the wedding it was meant to host 17 years ago. Detective Murphy appeared beside them, holding a manila envelope. I wanted to give you this before you left, she said. Marcus Beaumont was sentenced today. Life without parole. He'll never hurt anyone again. Isabel took the envelope but didn't open it. I don't need to know the details, she said. That part of our story is over. As Isabel and Thomas left for their honeymoon, a quiet week at a cabin in the mountains where no one would take their picture unless they wanted it taken, Miguel remained in the chapel, cleaning up the flowers and candles. The sanctuary was quiet now, peaceful in the way that only comes after long-awaited justice. Miguel straightened the altar cloth and extinguished the candles, knowing that this sacred space had finally fulfilled its purpose. Outside, church bells chimed across Savannah, announcing to the world that love had won, that evil had been defeated, and that sometimes, if you're very lucky and very stubborn, you get to see justice and healing triumph over darkness. The wedding that never was had finally become the wedding that always should have been. And in a city full of old stories and older ghosts, Isabel Hart and Thomas Grange began writing the rest of their love story as free people, surrounded by those who had never stopped believing they would come home. In the end, love had waited 17 years to speak its vows, and it had been worth every moment of the wait.